Okay. Now okay, so I apologize for the delay on that. Welcome to Chem 1330, Chemistry for Non-Science Majors. I'm Dr. Gray. I will be your instructor for this semester. I'm looking forward to this class. I, I've taught this class before and I enjoy it. It's kind of I know that um, you guys have taken 1310 and probably from a variety of different instructors with different styles, different approaches. Um, and so I'm hopeful that you enjoy the approach that I take. And I will definitely do my best to accommodate you and be responsive to ways that you learn. Now, with that in mind, we're going to be doing a number of different things. We'll have Zoom polls quite often during class. I have a tablet and a stylus that I always like to write on. Um, I don't want this to be an hour of you guys just staring at me kind of extemporaneously talking, or an hour and 20 minutes of me just rambling. And so I'm going to do my best to kind of engage you and have things that are make it worth your while to be here. Um, I will do my best also to make sure that I'm navigating through things without much clunkiness. And I apologize. I was just looking at my screen. I was like, maybe this is where the captioning is. Um, so with that in mind, I haven't yet posted our syllabus, and one of the reasons for that is I always like to kind of work through it a little bit, um, and make it as um, work through it kind of as we're building it out, or as I'm going through class here. Um, and then let's see. So is that what I want? Yeah. So that you guys can kind of see on the fly, um, what I'm working through here. Then what I wanted you to know is, um, yeah, so I will be posting our syllabus and I'll be posting the details of the semester on our Canvas page later today. So by the end of the day, you'll know when your exams are and when everything like that is. Um, but for the time, actually, I've got your exams here. So at any rate, Chem 1330, my name is Joel Gray. Dr. Gray, you're welcome to call me Dr. Gray. You're welcome to call me Joel. It doesn't bother me in any way or another. Um, so, however you want to address me, that's fine. I will pretty much always respond to my emails almost as muscle memory as Dr. Gray. Um, but I don't think that you should feel obligated to say, oh, well, I will say Joel Gray, or Dr. Gray or whatever you're most comfortable with. My email is joelgray@txstate.edu. Our class meetings will always use this link that's shown below and will be held Monday and Wednesday, 11 till 12:20 through Zoom. Here's the other information regarding that. I always record my Zoom meetings and then I post them on uh, our Canvas page. I post them on my YouTube channel. I post them on YouTube so that you'll have access to them kind of indefinitely. Um, but then I will kind of open the floor for you to uh, view them whenever you want. Um, I have office hours. My office hours are the ones that I've kind of set up are going to be immediately after this class between 12:30 and 1:30. If that time frame doesn't work for you, then go ahead and we can meet by appointment. And what I'd like you to do for our meetings by appointment, in order to get one of those, just email me and say, "Hey, Dr. Gray, are you available at this time?" And it's very important and helpful for me whenever you say, "Hey, can you meet with me at 2 p.m. on Thursday?" Give me a specific time, because then I can, then it's easier and it reduces the numbers of emails that we have to go back and forth on. So that's the designated time, but I'm available at times outside of this. Just shoot me an email. Um, Now the grading for this class. Well, I'll do grading in just a moment, but I want to share who I am a little bit. Like I said, I'm Dr. Gray. This is my family. This is me on the far right. Kind of looks, looks basically like myself here. I have a hat on. This is my wife, Catherine. We've been married since 2015. So we will have been married for 10 years this November. We've got three great little boys here. This is Otis, Otis. He is 8 and he is in third grade. This is Walter. Over the years, we tried to do different things. Like, for instance, we wanted to give him the shortened nickname of Walt or Walty. And at some point, he corrected us and he said, "My name is Walter." We were like, "Oh, you have agency. Got it." Then this right here is our 4-year-old. Oh, yeah. Walter is 6 and he is in first grade. This is Arlo and he is 4 years old. This is us at um, the river over by Ivar's that that restaurant on the river. Never actually been to it, but I've gone past it any number of times. They are the love of my life. They are wonderful, and yeah, I love them dearly. My background, I was born in the great state of, add it to the chat if you know what state that is. Didn't think this was going to be a geography class, but it is. Close. Wisconsin. That's right. Wisconsin is one of the Midwest states that, well, it kind of looks like a glove or a mitten. The other one being its across Lake Michigan neighbor. Here's Lake Michigan, and that would be the other mitten, or the one that's more like a mitten, and that is Michigan. I was born in Wisconsin, right around here, and yeah, it was wonderful. It's cold there. It's not cold here, or it's not cold in Texas. I was born in Wisconsin, and when I was about 1.5, my family moved down to College Station, Texas, home of Texas A&M. My dad had a bike shop until he passed, and so I grew up in College Station. I went to high school there. I was the mascot my senior year of high school, and I got to tell you that being the mascot at high school football games in Central Texas, even though I know some people consider College Station East Texas, I don't. I consider like Longview East Texas, and Beaumont East Texas. Um, Being the mascot at a high school football game in Texas is very, very warm, very, very hot. Yeah, lose a lot of sweat during those games. Um, then, whenever I graduated from high school, I went to live in that place. Does anyone know what that place is? It's not Wisconsin or Illinois. Bobcat Village. Yes. At Bobcat Village, I lived in the same apartment for 2 years, and I had an absolute perfect roommate situation. And that roommate was someone who I basically never talked to. And at the end of the first year, he was like, "So, well, think I can move out." I was like, "Oh, okay." And he said, "But, in the fall, I think I can come back. I think I'm just going to go ahead and sign up to be roommates again." And I said, "Sounds good." And then we proceeded to not really talk again. It was really fantastic. But I think that was my reclusiveness plus my social awkwardness that I really put into overdrive. Um, and after that, after I finished my undergraduate degree in biochemistry, BS biochemistry, I went to Texas A&M and I studied plants and how they respond to pathogens. I studied biochemistry. I got my PhD in biochemistry. And just so anyone is curious, the information that I've covered right here, my children's names and everything like that, are you going to have to know that? No, you're not. This is not expected content, or this is not expected knowledge for you guys. Um, but I studied this right here. This is a tomato leaf, and all these little lesions or all these little browned areas, that's where a pathogen has attacked and killed off some part of the plant. And one of the things that was pretty cool to me was, well, it's important to appreciate, study, and care for agriculture because that's how, you eat. Um, but also it was just kind of fascinating to learn how like a plant responds to a pathogen compared to a person. Um, Plants can't really like stand up and run away, but instead what they do is, and again, not required information, not required knowledge. Here is an example of a series of plant cells. And the fact that it looks like a poorly drawn flower is merely a coincidence. Um, but if this cell in the middle here is attacked by a pathogen, what it's going to do is it's going to send out a signal to all surrounding cells. And it's going to say, hey guys, bad news. I was attacked by a pathogen. And then the surrounding cells are going to be like, you were? When? Well, never mind. We don't need to know when, but this happened. And then this plant cell in the middle is going to be like, yes. And then all these surrounding cells, what they're going to do is be like, well, we've got to save the whole of the plant. So what we're going to do is we're going to receive the signal that, you were attacked and we're going to die. It might sound a little bit dramatic, but what effectively happens is when all of these surrounding plant cells die, um, that pathogen that's kind of in the middle there, it's not able to go here. It's not able to go here because these pathogens, or some of these pathogens, or the pathogen that I studied, it needs to survive off living tissue. And if it tries to leave this central cell, it doesn't have anywhere to go because all of the surrounding cells are dead. So if it's like, okay, well, I'm going to migrate out here. Nope, never mind, I can't because all these cells are dead. So it's this really coolly and really kind of fascinating system and how it's orchestrated. Um, so like I said, not required information, but it's just a little bit about me. Next up, communication. I use the announcements tool. I use that at least 3 to 5 times a week, typically. Individual emails, it's not super common, but I will reach out to people. For instance, if you miss an exam or if you miss something, or if we're a week out from the exam and you haven't turned anything in, you haven't attended any of the classes, I'm going to contact you and say, hey, something's going on. And I don't like to I don't want to be like, "Rah, rah, 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 rah. You're in trouble," because I'm kind of looking at it as you're kind of making a choice. Um, and I don't mean that in like a passive aggressive, backhanded, mean way, but instead like I'm going to reach out and say, what can I do to help you out? What can I do to make sure you come to class? I'll do that. But if you miss class or something like that, you're not going to get dropped from this class automatically. You're not going to automatically fail after missing like 3 classes or anything like that. I know that there are some people who do that, and I just kind of think that's silly. Um, I've got office hours, like I said, but then request them also. Shoot me an email that says, in gray, we've got a good one. That would be, hey, Dr. Gray, I've got some questions about our upcoming exam. Can you meet on Zoom at 1:30 p.m. on Friday the 5th? That's a great email. Hey, blank, because you don't know my name, um, either Joel or Dr. Gray. I need office hours. When can you do office hours? That's not a particularly good message just because of the fact that it's like you're not giving any parameters. You're not giving me a heads up of like, this is what we want to discuss. I'm not, for the second email, I'm not going to say like, no. But instead I'm going to respond with like, when are you thinking and what do you need to talk about? Because I want to know if you have questions about the content and the material, or if you've got like, you have a question about the logistics of the class, or am I going to pass? It's easiest. just to me, it's easiest to set up a meeting and give me kind of general parameters. Okay, now for grading for this class, do you only conduct office? No, I'm happy that I got this question. I meant to bring this up. This class is 100% online. Every component of this class, the class meetings and the office hours, they're all online. Um, so I that's how we'll do everything. We can do it through email or Zoom, um, or we can, correspond through email or meet on Zoom, but that's how we're doing it. And I'm not saying that like, and I don't want that to sound mean or anything like that, but yeah, that's the class. So great question, and I'm happy that that was asked. Now, how are you going to be evaluated in this class? I see already that I have a typo that I need to fix, which is one of the reasons why I like to do this sort of thing on the first day. Um, Make sure that I can fix things kind of on the fly. Um, is We will have 3 regular exams. They're going to be 15% of your grade each, and I'm going to toggle back to the syllabus in just a moment so that you have those dates. And I'll also have that on our schedule later today. Um, those 3 exams will be 15% each, giving us a total of 45%. Then we'll also have our final exam, which is 15%. Then there's participation, which is 10%, activities, which are 10%, and quizzes, which are 20%. So all of this adds up to a grand total of 20 plus 10 is 30, plus 15 is 45, plus 10 is 55, plus 45, that gets us to 100%. Okay, now with that in mind, sometimes during the semester, there will be quizzes, which these are going to be expect 3 per week. And these are going to be due Sundays at 11 p.m. And at 11, at like 11:15 p.m., the correct answers will be released, in which case that's when, you can't submit those anymore. So no late option. Activities. Expect about 2 per week. And these are also going to be, oh, and on Canvas, 2 per week, Sundays, 11 p.m. And these will be accepted late, 10% deducted per day late, and then up to 3 days late. After 3 days, they're not going to be accepted anymore. Okay, so the activities will be things that, they're going to be PDFs, and there'll be things like a crossword puzzle or, just genuinely activities. Um, there will be some that are kind of like a traditional stylized homework, but that's generally what they're going to be. Then the quizzes, for the quizzes, you're going to have 2 attempts each. Um, and those will be kind of open notes, you know, open materials. The only thing that I don't want you to do is use college tools or ChatGPT or anything to answer these questions. You have 2 attempts, and you'll be able to see the score that you got, so you'll be able to deduce, okay, well, I felt good about these 7 questions. I got these two, I got 5 of them right. Okay, so which ones did I get wrong? And you'll have to deduce that and kind of critically think that through. The last thing that I wanted to talk about with respect to grading is it's not intended to be complicated, but it is kind of inherently complicated. Um, and what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to talk about that after I give the details on the exam. So, um, now I'm going to come back to the slide in just a moment. So, exams. Your exams are going to be administered on Proctorio, so you need to have a webcam to be in compliance, and you need that to be in compliance with security standards. Zoom is also required. So what that means is we're going to be using like a two-device method for exam proctoring. So you'll have your webcam on your laptop or your desktop computer that you'll be using to take the exam through Proctorio. Then you'll also have a second device, like your phone or another laptop or something like that. I think phone is the most common because not many people have like five laptops or two laptops for that matter. And you'll have this other device set up right here. Now, in the event that you do not have that, I need you to contact me and we'll communicate. We'll figure it out. But you'll log into Proctorio to take your exam, and then you'll also use Zoom to take the to have like a side view set up so I can see kind of like what your disk space works or looks like. Um, your exams are going to be a mixture of multiple choice and multiple answer questions. They're going to be on Canvas. They're going to be about 35 to 40 questions. Now, this is where I'm going to go back and forth a little bit. I'm going to go from this slide to the previous slide where we're looking at the grading. Okay, so you will have exams 1, exam 2, exam 3, and then a final. The content that we'll cover this semester, I'm going to refer to it as modules. So you'll have module 1, module 2, and module 3. So I'll use this M1, M2, M3. If it's more helpful for you, you could think about it as module 1 is like chapters 1 through 3. Module 2 is chapters 4 through 7. And module 3 is chapters 8 through 12. Now, I'm just using chapters kind of as a placeholder because we won't be using chapters. Instead, it's kind of broken down into modules because we don't really have an assigned textbook. All the content that you need in this class will be provided to you through our PowerPoint presentations. Okay, so add to the chat M1, M2, or M3. What do you think is going to be on exam number 1? I like it. We got votes for M1. Oh, we got one vote for all 3. So exam 1 will only have the module 1 material. Now, add to the chat what you think is going to be on the final exam. Got the vote for all 3, all modules, all 3. Perfect. M1 plus M2 plus M3. So when it comes to the final exam, um, let's say that I'm just going to use exam 1 and the final exam for this. Let's say when you take the first exam. Now, I'm going to give you a scenario. This is a really unfortunate, dramatic scenario, but let's say that you get sick a week before the exam. And so you miss class, you miss some other things, you miss some quizzes, and that stinks. And then like the day that you're starting to feel better is the day before your exam. You're like, okay, feeling better. I got one day to kind of cram it all in, and then I can take my first exam. And then just as you're about to start studying, then your your dog gets sick. And you're like, oh man, well, this is my dog. I don't want to like just say, hang in there, bud. You take your dog to the vet, right? You do the responsible and caring thing. And then you're like, all right, pup. Oh no, I missed all my time to study because you're dealing with going to the vet, waiting, you're studying, you're working hard on it. And finally, you're able to carve out a little bit of time. Your dog just got into some like sour milk or something like that, and that upset its stomach. And when you take that first exam, module one content, you get let's go with a 60. Okay. Now you're like, oh man, it's not as good as I wanted. It's a, it's not really a passing grade, but here we go. Now let's go to, and this is like your traditional class. Okay, so you start out with a 60, and that stinks. Um, Now exam number two. Okay, so you go to exam number two and you don't get sick, but again, your dog gets sick. And so, like 2 days before, you have to take it to the vet, and then you got to go get groceries and you got to do all this stuff, and you get a little bit more time to study. And for exam number two, let's say that you get an 80. And you're like, okay, that's an improvement. And then exam three rolls around and you get all the time that you want to study. And you're like, man, this is just some tough material. And let's say that you're typically a strong A student. On an exam number three, you get a 75. You had the time to study, but you're just like, there are some things that I had trouble wrapping my mind around. Now, let's say whenever you go to take your final exam, you study all that M1 material, and you're like, I've aced it. I've got it. Man, if I could only take exam one again, I know I'd get a perfect score on it. And so when you take that final, you get a 100 on basically all your M1 material. Then same thing with that with exam two, you get a 100. And then exam three, you talk to me, you talk to your classmates, and you ace that stuff. You had the time and you thought about some things and it just got better. You get a 100. Your final exam, it's a 100. You did awesome on that final exam. And you walk away from this class and you're like, I got it. I know exactly how to do all that stuff. Like my mastery of that content is awesome. Now, without doing the calculation, but just looking at those rough numbers, what do you think that means for your grade for the class? Your final exam was a 100, but you have these other grades, the 60, the 80, the 75. Just give me a rough estimation without doing the calculation. Do you think that person's going to end up with an A, B, or a C with a kind of traditional teaching or grading style? We got vote for a B, vote for an A, vote for a B. If I had to guess, most times that person's going to kind of end up with a B because if we do the calculation, I know that I told you not to, um, but that exam one grade brings you down. The exams two and three grades, those are kind of similar to one another. Sure, you got a 100 on the final, but each one of these things are worth 15%. So each one of these things being worth 15% means that even though at the end of the semester you aced it, you knew it all, that doesn't that doesn't fix it in a sense. Now, to kind of account for that, I've been using this grading scheme for a little while. This is called a cumulative grading strategy. And it's a little bit different because, in your traditional class for exam two, it's going to be module two stuff. For exam three, it's going to be module three stuff. And then on the final, you have that cumulative exam. Well, the way that this is different is when you go to take your second exam, what you're going to get is an exam that's module one and module two stuff. And what that means is, when you're taking exam number two, you're kind of having to look back on a lot of stuff. And that makes it a little bit more challenging, but everything that we're doing in this class is intended to build off of everything that we've previously done. So the stuff that we talk about in the very first week of classes is going to lead you to learning about the second weeks and the third weeks and the fourth and the fifth and so on. Now, exam two is going to be your module one and module two stuff. And let's say you really like when you're preparing for exam number two, you say, I've had more time to think about the module one stuff and I've aced it. Module two stuff is kind of new. And let's say that you end up with an 80 on that. Well, then when it comes time to take exam number three, that exam number three is going to be composed of module two and module three stuff. Okay, and let's say that you, again, had a little bit more time to work on that module two stuff, and you get better, you improve on it. You improve your understanding of module two stuff, and then module three, you might struggle with that a little bit. Let's say that you get a 75 on that. So these grades that I'm throwing down aren't any different. But what I want to show you is what we will do ultimately is you will be tested over module one stuff. 1, 2, and 3 times.
In there.
Do you have a question, Joanne?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay, no worries. So you've got that material that you've basically visited a couple of times, or you'll visit a total of 3 times, in which case you're going to have to kind of be ready to address it 3 different times. And so are the questions going to be the exact same? No, they're not. Are they going to be similar? Are they going to be kind of derivatives of one another? They are. Now, what that means is then you'll also be tested over module 2 stuff 1, 2, and 3 times. Module 3, just because of the number of exams that we have, you'll only be tested over module 3 2 times. So you get 2 shots at it. Now, what this ultimately leads to is whenever you take that final exam and you get whatever score you get, I'm going to compare that to what you got on exam number 1. So in the grade book, in the way that I will see the grade book, you will have exam 1, exam 2, exam 3, and then the final. And these will be kind of like different categories in your grade book, each one worth 15%. 15%, 15%, and 15%. Now, in that exam 1 category, I'm going to call it CAT E1. You'll have the exam 1 score, the exam 2, and the final. And you'll have all of those because the category for exam 1 is going to be looking at all the scores that you have when you were asked questions related to module number 1. So you got a 60, you got an 80, and then you got a 100 on the final. Exam 2, well, that's going to have E2, E3, and then the final. E3 is going to be, well, E3 and the final. And then your final is just going to be your final exam score. Okay, now these numbers, so let's look at E2, that's an 80, that's a 75, and then a 100, and then a 75, and a 100. What I'm going to do with these numbers is for each one of these categories, I'm going to set a rule. And for this rule, it's going to be drop the lowest for category E1, drop the lowest 2 grades. So the 60 and the 80 are going to be dropped. Exam 2, well, your rule is going to be applied and the 80 and the 75 are going to be dropped. And then for exam 3, the 75 is going to be dropped. It's going to drop the lowest grade, not the lowest 2. So effectively in this case, when you scored higher on the final exam than what you got on every other exam, that final exam becomes your most important score. Now, one thing, so effectively, what you can do is if you do really well in the final, it replaces every other exam grade. Now, a very fair and honest question to ask is, well, what if my final is lower? Let's say on the final, I'm going to keep all the rest of the scores in here. Let's say on the final you get a 55. Well, then that 55 comes in to each one of these spots. And the 55 is compared to those. So if we look at E1 or that category E1, well, then the 60 is going to be dropped and the 55 is going to be dropped because those are the two lowest scores. The 55 and the 75 are going to be dropped. The 55 is going to be dropped. So the score on the final exam is really just going to be compared to everything else. But the point and the purpose and the intention of all of this is to basically kind of incentivize revisiting older exams and making sure that you like and kind of shoring up your understanding of something. Like if you didn't understand something the first time you saw it, well, take another look at it because you'll see it again. Um, could everyone give me a thumbs up if this makes sense? And then if you want, send me a private message of a thumbs down if it doesn't make sense. The emoji or typing it all in works either way. And if you want to ask a question about it, you're more than welcome to. Okay. Now, I will be completely candid with you. There have been some students over the years who have seen this and been like, I know how to hack this. I'm not going to prepare for any of my exams. And then I'm just going to go in and ace the final. Um, you're welcome to try that. I don't think that's a good strategy. And I think that that's kind of counter to learning. Um, I don't want you to view this as a game, and I don't want you to view this as a challenge of any sort. My intention with this is for you to study it and try it the first go and see if you have a good understanding of it. If you don't, then I want you to pinpoint this, this, and this. These were my weaknesses. I need to shore these things up. I didn't understand this. I didn't understand this. Revisit those before you see it again. Um, I'm intending for this to be like a opportunity for you to be exposed to something and then ask yourself the question, do I understand this? Yes or no? Okay. Um, so there's all that. That's all that important stuff. And it looks like I got a bunch of thumbs up. If at some point you would like to discuss this with me, absolutely. Let's do that. I'm absolutely fine with doing that. And we can, as the semester wears on, we can pull your specific grades and say, okay, well, if you do this, if you score this on the final, what will happen? Um, I just remember from my own experience whenever I would, try hard on a first exam and not get the score that I wanted, and then unfortunate some sort of circumstance comes into play on the second exam, and then I would, tank that. And then it was like, well, I guess even if I ace the final, the best I can expect is like a C. And that stinks. That just feels like kind of desperate. Um, and so I want to kind of respond to that. Now, with that, before I proceed, I want to go back because I added this one thing, and that is there is going to be a Proctorio practice quiz. This is going to be due Sunday, the 19th at 11 p.m. And this is going to be bonus points. And it's going to be 2 bonus points to final exam score. Um, and it is just going to be basically a way for you to confirm that Proctorio works for you. And if it does not, what you need to do is you need to kind of get it working. Um, this will be posted later today and it will be due Sunday the 19th at 11 p.m. Like I said, one simple question. If you get it right, 2 bonus points. And if you get it wrong, well, then just do it again until you get it right. The question that's asked in this practice quiz isn't really the point. Um, in the event that you have issues, chances are if well, you'll have to install Proctorio. If you get a response that it's not working, or a sign that it is not working, is if you are asked for an access code. So if you're prompted for an access code, that means Proctorio is not working for you. And Proctorio is a browser extension. So what you need to do is probably update your browser or switch browsers. Make sure that your computer software is all up to date. And if that does switch. If that doesn't work, email itac@txstate.edu. So if you're prompted for an access code, that means that you need to make some change. You maybe have a pop-up blocker or something that's engaged that's stopping Proctorio from working. Okay, so now, does anyone have any questions about how this class is going to operate and what we're going to do? Right, well, if something comes up, please feel free to send me a message, either in Zoom or in an email. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and get cracking. Um, all of the details about your class are going to be on your Canvas page by the end of the day, including this PowerPoint and the syllabus. Um, so with that in mind, though, we're going to be talking about kind of human health. We're going to be talking about proteins. We're going to be talking about drugs. And we'll also talk a little bit about dietary supplements, like vitamin C. Why should you take it? How much should you take? Vitamin D, should you take it? Should you not take it? How vitamin D gets processed in your body and everything like that. So we're going to be talking about those things this semester. Um, but before we get into that, the first thing that I want to talk to you about is the drug development process. And this is drugs related to like Alzheimer's or um, antibiotics. They all kind of go through very similar processes. Things that lower cholesterol or blood pressure. In order to do that, there is first a discovery and development process. You've got to find a molecule that interacts with a target protein in a specific and desired way. The next thing, the second step here. So we find our target. The next thing is preclinical research. So we test if that molecule works in cells, in vitro, and then in a living organism in vivo. So think about in vitro as being like in a test tube. Um, and then in vivo is a way of testing if it like the physiological or like the how does the organism, how does the animal respond? After that, we're going to test the molecules in humans, and that would be our clinical development. So, in a clinician, a research clinician is going to help out with that. Then, once that's all completed, um, that clinical trial data is collected and submitted to the Food and Drug Administration, which reviews, and this is in the United States. In different countries, you have different entities and different bodies that do this. Basically, everything from steps 1 to 3 determine if the scientific evidence was collected and analyzed correctly, as well as determine if the drug is safe and effective for humans. So that's where your FDA review comes in. And then After that, when a drug is on the market, when the drug is available to the public, pharmaceutical company and the Food and Drug Administration continue to monitor the safe and effectiveness of the commercially available drug. Have there been instances? There have been instances where the drug was deemed too dangerous and pulled from the market. If it's something that, it's almost like it's too risky, it's too damaging. The benefits don't outweigh the risks, and the risks are simply too high. So when we're designing a drug, we have these different phases. So there's target discovery, target validation, lead generation and refinement, and then preclinical development. So when we're designing a drug, what we want to do is we want to find all the potential targets. So I always kind of think about this as being like doing a puzzle. And whenever I say that, I mean like if you're building a puzzle, um, you have your big picture that you want to assemble, but let's say that you've got part of a puzzle that's already assembled. And let's say that here is what we're doing. I'm going to go with a three-piece puzzle. There we go. Um, And what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, we know that this is a corner piece. So this is going to, we have a little bit of information about how that piece comes in. And let's say you are looking through your puzzle pieces and you find a bunch of pieces that have one flat side. That's not a very well drawn puzzle piece. And then one that looks like this with two flat sides, and then another that looks like this with two flat sides. And my puzzle analogy is not absolutely perfect, but bear with me. Okay, so you'd look at it and you'd say, okay, I need a flat side. So do any of these puzzle pieces work? They do. They all work, in fact, because they all have your minimum criteria of a flat side. Okay, so that's where we say, all right, well, that's all of our possible targets. We needed a puzzle piece with a flat side. We found three puzzle pieces with at least one flat side. You look a little bit deeper into it and you say, oh, well, actually, I need a puzzle piece with two flat sides. And so we're going to eliminate these two, or that one, I'm sorry, because that only has one flat side. These other two, on the other hand, well, this would work because it's got two flat sides, and this would also work because it has two flat sides. But then when you go to actually put those puzzle pieces in, you realize that one of them fits better than the other. And so let's say that this is the one I'm shading in green, is the one that fits better, in which case we would eliminate this. And so this would be our puzzle piece or our molecule that we're like, okay, well, that's the drug. That's the molecule that's going to fit into the puzzle or the parts of the puzzle that we've got. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to proceed with this one. I've eliminated my wrong targets that don't fit the complete criteria of what I'm looking for. So those two are out. Now I've got this third one that I'm going to proceed with. And then what we're going to do, this is our kind of refinement. We're going to say, all right, well, now let's go on to develop this. Let's try this in cells. How does this drug work? And then if it works in an in vitro setting, working with the test tube or in a test tube, then we're going to proceed to a mouse model. And then we're going to proceed to a monkey model, or we're going to proceed to basically different organism levels to see how effective this drug is. Now, drug targets. Drug targets are typically proteins. Now, can anyone think of a protein? And I mean like any protein without using penicillin binding protein. What's a protein maybe if you go to the gym or something, what's a protein that people use? A dietary protein. Whey. Yeah. Well, chicken is a chicken has lots of proteins. Whey protein is a good example. That's what I was kind of leaning towards because whey protein is a mixture of a series of proteins. Um, this molecule shown here is an example of a protein. Um, and whenever I think of a protein, some of the proteins that I think about, and give me a thumbs up if any of these words are at all familiar. Collagen, keratin, ferritin. Yeah. Okay. These are all proteins that they're kind of like, whenever I think of a protein, I think of like a molecular machine. I think about something on the molecular or atomic level that does something. Another one that maybe you're familiar with is hemoglobin. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever heard of hemoglobin. And then if you've heard of hemoglobin, what does hemoglobin do? I'll give you a hint. Awesome. Great. Perfect. Hemoglobin is the protein that whenever you inhale, all the oxygen that you've inspired goes into your lungs, goes to your alveoli. Yes, hemoglobin is absolutely responsible for that. When you cook a steak, you're going to see lots of hemoglobin come out in the blood because hemoglobin, what it does is it takes protein or it takes oxygen from the atmosphere to my fingers, to my toes, to my peripheral tissues. Um, these are examples of proteins and they do something. Keratin and collagen, those are structural proteins. And what they do is they kind of give your cells and give your body like structure. Like if you take collagen, if you like take collagen as a dietary supplement, your fingernails are going to be like they're going to be like hard. They're going to be yeah. You're gonna when you tap your fingernails against your desk, someone's going to hear it. Um, because all of your fingernails are going to be fortified with that. Now, um, other proteins are related to diseases. So drug targets typically go after a protein and a protein that is involved in causing a disease state or can help alleviate the disease. Now, if you're thinking about or familiar with hemoglobin, you might be familiar with a disease associated with it or a disease state known as sickle cell anemia. Um, sickle cell anemia is related to a um, variation of hemoglobin that causes your red blood cells, RBCs, red blood cells, to rather than be kind of like a disc shape, to form a kind of sickled shape. And that sickled shape can lead to, well, ultimately it can lead to death, but it can also cause like a basically a disease state where it's tough for you to get oxygen to all of your tissues. Um, and so any sort of drug that can revert or cause a sickled cell to go from that to this state, that's a very powerful and good drug. Um, now, a drug target, well, amoxicillin, an antibiotic. Amoxicillin targets penicillin binding protein in bacteria. So, amoxicillin is the specific drug, and your target is the penicillin binding protein. Now, the desired effect. So, this penicillin binding protein is found in bacteria. This penicillin binding protein in the bacteria, well, it's going to bind. I'm going to do some erasing here. It's going to bind AMOX, your amoxicillin. It's going to bind it. And then what's going to happen is this bacteria, because it binds to that amoxicillin, it's going to die because the bacteria is unable to kind of build its cell wall. Now, when it comes to evaluating drugs and targets of drugs, we do something known as target validation. And so there are a couple of different ways that we can validate that we have the right target. Well, we can genetically modify an organism, whether that's a mouse or a rat or something like that. And we can change how much protein is in the cell by turning on or off a particular gene. For example, if the protein is not made because a gene is turned off and that causes the disease, then we validated that that protein affects the disease and is a potential target. We can also use antibodies. Antibodies can bind the protein and prevent it from working in the cell. If a protein affects the disease, then blocking the activity may either cause or cure the disease in the cell. Then we can also do chemical genomics, where we can use chemicals known to be involved in the disease and see if they bind to that protein. If the chemicals do bind to the protein and change the protein's activity in the cell, then it can be validated as a target. So basically what we're doing is we're saying, all right, we've got a protein, our target, and we want to either block this protein or I'm going to say, or remove that protein and either block it with an antibody or eliminate that protein by genetic manipulation, genetic manip, or use chemical genomics to kind of disrupt that protein. Now, if we do any one of those things and we see that that disease continues, okay, well then that protein is definitely involved in that process. Now, when we have a target, how do we design a drug? Well, what we can do is we can go back and make a model of a protein, like what we see here with this green structure. And whenever you think about a protein, proteins move. They're kind of, I always use my palm as an example of a protein because a protein is going to bind to oxygen, hold on to oxygen, then release oxygen. Um, Anything we can do to like lock up a protein in a particular structure is going to be powerful because it's almost like you're disrupting its natural ability. So, what we're going to do is we're going to look at and try to visualize what a protein looks like. And in order to do that, we've got to learn a little bit of organic chemistry and biochemistry before we can understand how chemicals interact with proteins. Now, organic chemistry, has anyone ever watched Breaking Bad? If you've watched Breaking Bad or you're familiar with that show, um, you're ahead of me because I've only watched the first like two episodes. Um, Maybe that means I'm lazy. I don't know. But that is the like area of expertise that Walter White has. He's an organic chemist and he designs drugs that street pharmacists deliver, but also just kind of illegal drugs and illicit drugs. Meth, I think, is the only thing that he does or produces. Um, but organic chemistry and organic chemistry synthesis is basically how most drugs are produced. And um, organic chemistry allows us to understand what interactions a drug can form with a target protein by observing the chemical composition of that drug. The interactions are how chemicals attract or repel one another. Um, for example, favorable interactions, Na plus or sodium is attracted to a polar water molecule. Now, when you took 1310, we talked a little bit about this terminology polar. We had polar and nonpolar, and we talked a lot about Lewis structures. So this semester we'll be looking through Lewis structures. But Na plus, a sodium ion, well, that is a substance that wants an electron. So when it sees something like this, whenever a sodium ion sees this, when sodium has that positive charge and that oxygen has those electrons, that sodium is like, oh, I see electrons. I'm going to go bind to them. That's a favorable interaction. Now, an unfavorable interaction would be something like, I'll use methane, CH4. So this is polar. This methane is nonpolar, and water is polar. Well, methane sees that water molecule and says, oh, it's polar. So I don't care. I don't like polar things. So methane is like, meh, don't care, move on. So that's not a favorable interaction. So you can kind of block this almost. Now, an example, prednisone has oxygen atoms that will allow it to be slightly soluble in water. If you remember, finish this sentence or finish this phrase for me. Like dissolves. Like dissolves like. A polar substance can be dissolved by a polar solvent. A nonpolar solvent will dissolve a nonpolar substance. Now, organic chemistry allows us to like design molecules. Biochemistry allows us to study the target proteins. So the interactions of the protein with the drug and how the target protein is involved in a disease. That's what we're really aiming to do, and that's what we're going to kind of work on this semester. Um, so we're going to be working through some basics of organic chemistry, some basics of biochemistry. We're going to be talking about interactions of things, and that's kind of the plan for this semester. There will be some days where we have activities during class, and then some days where we have just kind of lectures like this. In the meantime, though, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. Then I'm going to stop my recording.